Are Christians hypocrites? A response to the recent Pew research about refugees with helpful tips for you. Greetings all, it is I, the Theosaurus Rex. I have been sick as of late, and the steroids they've got me on to augment my antibiotic has been keeping me up, so instead of sleeping, I journey to and fro around Facebook and Twitter, looking to see what people are talking about and how I can help them. And there's one story that's really been making its rounds. I've engaged with people on it and found that many people who don't agree with me tend to fall into two camps. And the people who do agree with me don't really know the best way to respond. So I thought to myself, well, self, this is a great opportunity. There's a number of articles going around citing a particular Pew Study. The Pew Study asked people, do you think the U.S. has a responsibility to accept refugees into the country? Or do you think the U.S. does not have a responsibility to do this? I've included in the description below a link to one of the articles, there are a lot of them, as well as the Pew Study in and of itself. I've included the actual study so you can read through it and really look at the stats and everything. And just as a side note, if the article you're reading cites something but doesn't actually show a citation, you should probably try to get the information elsewhere. Anyway, articles like the Washington Post one, including commentary like the one that I have on the screen right now. It says, but Pew's new research includes a fascinating detail. No group agrees less with the idea that the United States has a responsibility to accept refugees than white evangelical Protestants. Only 25% of evangelicals told Pew that they believe the United States has such a responsibility. Half the percentage of Catholics who said the same thing, and substantially lower than the religious unaffiliate. In statistical terms, the percentage of evangelicals holding the view is equal to the percentage of Republicans, 26%, given margins of error. The discussions I've seen typically center around how this is a terrible sign for Christianity. From Christians, the people making the arguments that this is unchristian, and they tend to be more liberal, who also find this affront to their social justice beliefs. They will argue that Christians are betraying their values, that this is the effect of putting politics over the commands of Christ, and choosing people like Trump has done this. They also tend to bring up Old Testament scriptures about refugees, mainly citing from Leviticus. From non-Christians, typically you see calls of hypocrisy, because when it comes to socially conservative issues, Christians often cite their religion as a way to affect policy. Such instances are that of homosexuality and abortion. While these accusations aren't exclusive to Christian non-Christian camps, and irregardless of the legitimacy of the points they're making, they're using the wrong evidence to back up their argument. Looking at the Pew Study, the question that was asked was, quote, do you think the U.S. has a responsibility to accept refugees into the country? Or do you think the U.S. does not have a responsibility to do this? The wording of this question, end quote. The wording of this question has nothing to do with Christian ethics or morals. It has nothing to do with morality at all. It simply asks about the responsibility of the United States. And the answer is no. The United States is a constitutional republic. The U.S.'s responsibilities are defined by the Constitution, and those responsibilities are threefold. A, the United States has a responsibility to protect its citizens at home and abroad. B, to facilitate trade amongst the states. C, to mediate disputes. That's what the question was about. What the people condemning Christians about are falsely using a study to push their own agendas, and they're using it to springboard to touch and lecture on other topics. First, what we have to do is center the argument back on the evidence. Point out the facts of the situation based on the evidence they're using. Feel free to acknowledge that they may have a point about X, but that this study doesn't speak to that. Don't let them decide the rules of the discussion, especially if it's based off something that's incorrect. Secondly, if you feel like it or have time, address the points they actually want to make, but don't let them use this study, as you will be admitting their point on it, especially when the study has nothing to do with that. So, I have two kind of go-to rebuts that I have for both non-Christians and Christians. First, to the non-Christians about their arguments of Christian hypocrisy, I'd say something along the lines of this. So let me clarify. Do you believe that Christians should seek to enact their religious beliefs as law, and that we should base laws off of Christian principles? By calling something around like that. Now, by calling Christians hypocrites, they, without realizing it, are advocating for this. When they inevitably respond with something along the lines of, no, but if they do it for other issues, what makes us any different? At which point you go back to the study itself, point out how the individual you're discussing with is reading into the question, and how ultimately, instead of rushing to judgment about Christians being hypocrites and taking potshots when Christians agree with them, they should be thankful and stop being hypocrites themselves. When it comes to Christians who believe the people answering the questions are being anti-biblical, the argument is simpler, but you have two tactics. First, you can agree with them and put them on the defensive. Oftentimes, social justice or liberal Christians are the first to start picking and choosing which aspects of Christianity they should embrace. When I decide to go this way, I often ask, let me clarify here. Are you arguing that we can't pick and choose which aspects of Christianity we should follow? If so, do you plan on changing your belief on blank? Then pick and choose the idea you want to call them out on. By placing them on the defensive, you're able to show them how they don't really have a leg to stand on. They themselves are unrepentantly guilty of what they're accusing other Christians of, and they themselves are hypocrites. Be warned, though, the specific style of response tends not to go over so well because people don't like being reminded that they're being hypocritical and not as morally pure as they'd like to think. This will also put you in a position where you'll have to defend your view of whatever it is you call them out on. Now, the second one, you can agree and point to the other things that their argument is supporting. This particular response only works when they end up citing something like Leviticus or other Old Testament scriptures, and typically doesn't get much of a response back. Here's how it goes. They will cite one of the alien verses, like in Exodus 22:21, Leviticus 19:9-10, 33:34, 23:22, or 24:22. Or maybe something in Deuteronomy Numbers, something that talks about taking the refugee in and being nice to them and not turning the refugee away. My response is simple. You do realize that if you advocate that we enact laws based on Old Testament scripture, you would then be a hypocrite if you didn't also advocate that we stone homosexuals, stone disobedient children, stone people for various sexual sin, or blaspheming God. Not to mention that while we're at it, we may as well ban abortion and other things Christians typically advocate for, since you're okay with writing public policy based on scripture now. The point of this type of response is to get them to get past the snipes on Christians who disagree with them, but hopefully get them to think about the full consequences of getting what they want. Since the typical Christian who will be leveling this argument will probably be on the more liberal side, they will find the ideas you've suggested abhorrent. This is a type of reductio ad absurdum logical argument. And what that basically means is that you are trying to point out how absurd their argument is by taking it to its most logical endpoint. Boom. Now you have a few responses. If you want to be a little bit snarky, but hopefully through those and this video, you've been equipped to responsibly and logically respond to the article, the original post, as well as given some different ways to think about topics in online discussions. As always, feel free to comment below, subscribe, or reach out to me on social media. My Twitter is St. Theosaurus Rex, St. Theosaurus Rex, and the rest of my confirmation as well as sources for this video can be found in the description. Thanks for everything, and I'll see you guys next time.